In this video, I'm going to show you an example of how to select criteria for a specific assignment, just to give you an example. Okay? So here's the assignment, and I mentioned this in a previous discussion post earlier in the course. The assignment is something that I had when I taught another class for Fresno Pacific in their degree completion program. The course was broken up in two parts. Basically, it was essentially titled Math for Elementary Teachers, Part 1, Math for Elementary Teachers, Part 2. And I used the same assignment in both parts of the course. Obviously we're in California for Fresno Pacific, and so the teachers, because I used to teach this class face-to-face as well, the teacher candidates would in the future need to be passing some type of state test, possibly two of them even. One was called the C-Best and one is called the C-Set. And each one of them had a writing component. The C-Set specifically had a writing component that had to do with math. And so for teachers, prospective teachers, to be able to pass this test, they had to be able to write about a specific math problem and how they solved that problem. I think that's an excellent question to ask a prospective teacher that is going to be teaching math specifically at the elementary level. Can you explain a problem in detail, step by step, to a student? We just happen to be doing it in writing, but writing it down makes you really think through the steps of it. So let me provide you with a kind of a shortened version of the instructions. I'm not providing you everything that I provided the students. I just want you to get the idea of what the assignment was. And then we're going to look at developing the rubric criteria for that. So here are the instructions. In the course, each week you'll be asked to complete a constructed response, it's called in the CSAT test, to a sample CSAT question that has to do with the topics for that particular week of the class, the topics that we covered that particular week. These constructed responses need to include a thorough explanation of the math you used to solve the problem that was given to you in the prompt in a step-by-step manner, and if at all possible, a diagram or even multiple diagrams that represent the problem and your solution. You need to treat these questions as if they are coming from a student and you are explaining every detail to that student about how to solve the particular problem. Make sure you don't leave out steps. I want you to write about the math involved. Okay? So hopefully you kind of grasp what this assignment is that we're going to build these criteria for in beginning to develop this rubric. And so I also want you to understand that I'm choosing a rubric here for that course as an example in multiple areas in this class. We're going to come back to this rubric a couple of times. One of those is going to be the fact that when I was doing the research for this class, as I was writing it, I happened to find a copy of this rubric from back in 2014 when I first started teaching this class. And so don't judge me on this rubric. It was back in the day when I first wrote it, but I want to kind of look at it later in the course and see maybe how that got developed, later as I taught the class more into the future, because we're going to be looking at that later in this course, how to develop your rubrics over time. And so all we're going to be looking at here is developing the criteria for a rubric. So we're going to develop a table, a rubric inside of a table here. And here are the criteria that I came up. Maybe when I was reading those instructions, you immediately thought of some things that, I would want the students to demonstrate this or whatever. So see how I did here compared to what you were thinking. So I came up with these criteria. Their writing and their diagrams need to be clear and easy to read, because when they're writing and drawing their diagrams for the CSAT exam people that are grading that, because it is in writing and so on, it's not machine's not grading it. Obviously it needs to be, they need to be able to read their writing. They need to be able to understand their diagrams. And so those are skills that I want them to develop as we progress through the course. The math involved. I want to make sure that they are using actual math. Again, this came from a topic that we had discussed this week in class. So I want to know that they learned the math or knew the math for that particular concept and some of the things we talked about and how to teach that math. And so the mathematics involved is critical in the process. The procedure that they used to solve the problem. In this class, we also talk about problem solving. And so what procedure did they use to solve this problem? Did they literally just keep guessing until they got it right? Or, not that that's not a problem solving technique, but there are some better ones to use. And so what's the procedure that they used? The solution. It would be awesome if they came up with the correct solution. It would be awesome if they came up with a solution, right? That their equation or whatever they're using to solve the problem actually, they end it and it comes up with a solution. And so we want a solution here, preferably the correct solution. That would be good. Now, I know this one may sound dumb or whatever, but that this is a big thing in math education, is that we need to make sure the student answers the question, because most of these CSAT questions, of course, are word problems. And so just because you came up with a solution doesn't mean it's the solution that they were looking for. Doesn't mean it's the answer to the question that they were asking. And so I want to make sure that they went back to the question and actually answered that question, depending on what solution they came up with, based on the problem that they came up with and the procedure that they used to solve it. Okay. And then they had to submit, well, when you're doing the CSAT test by computer, you have to submit it in a specific format. And so I wanted them to emulate that process here as they worked to learning the whole process of doing this. And then again, this was actually done as a discussion in the class. It was not something they submitted, like directly to me as an assignment. It was a discussion. So the last item is reply. They had to reply to 2 of their peers as well. And so that became part of the scoring rubric for their overall grade for this assignment. And so I included the replying to peers within this. So based on the assignment that I was giving, based on the instructions, at least the subset of the instructions that I provided for you, I want you to look through those criteria and see, does that hit everything that should be measured? Am I missing something? Do I have overlap going on here? Some of those questions that we talked about previously of what the criterion that we looked at for developing criteria, did I hit those criterion when I developed these criteria for this particular rubric? I just want you to think about that. I'd love to hear some of your responses on that if you have something that you feel that stands out here one way or the other that I missed or whatever. But this is just an example. And again, we're going to come back to this rubric multiple times throughout the rest of the course as one of our examples. We're going to look at others, obviously, but we'll come back to this rubric later. But I just wanted to provide you an example of developing criteria for a rubric.